And I'm going to show you in a moment just why we are prone to do so. The glory does not lie in our inadequacy. This is not a plea for going around like Uriah Heep, trying to tell everybody I'm a very humble man, but lies in the adequacy of Christ, which is discovered in our weakness and in our insufficiency. So, again, Peterson's paraphrase at the end, he says, now I take limitations in my stride, and with good cheer. These limitations that cut me down to size, and so the weaker I get, the stronger I become. Fullness, the reverse is the case. Since dependence is the objective, weakness is the advantage. Secondly, let's look at it in terms of the cultural setting in which we read our Bibles and in which we respond to these truths. Sense of human capacity, a bloated sense of human capacity. In keeping with that assessment, and writing in the Wall Street Journal in July 2009, Peggy Noonan observed in one of her columns, quotes, "For 30 years, the self-esteem movement told the young they're perfect in every way. It's yielding something new in history, an entire generation with no sense of inadequacy." And in one of them, he records a search of 300 United Kingdom newspapers in 1980, they couldn't find a single one. In 1986, they found 3 citations. By 1990, there were 103. A decade later, in 2000, there were a staggering 3,328 references. Who knows how many there are today? The central and controlling feature of human existence. Whatever else happens, we must never ever lose that. It is the key to everything, our world tells us. It says, and if you care to read the book, he works it out. New York Times, entitled, "It's Not About You." He described the graduates setting off into the world with what he refers to as the baby boomer theology, so often iterated in commencement addresses ringing in their ears. And then he articulates that theology. Follow your passion. Chart your own course. Follow your dreams. Find yourself. This, says Brooks, is the litany of expressive individualism, which is still the dominant theme in American culture. Again, quoting him, today's graduates enter a cultural climate that preaches the self as the center of life. But, says Brooks in his concluding sentence, the purpose in life is not to find yourself, it is to lose yourself. Are we going to have to turn to the editorial pages of the New York Times in order to correct the warped theology of contemporary evangelicalism? And we shouldn't assume that's kind of pushback. In 2010, last year, the current president of Dart, Young Kim, referenced a statement in 2010. The starting point for this mentality actually is not high school graduation. It's beginning a lot earlier than that, as those of you who are doing child psychology. Achievement is aspired to from the moment of birth, if not before. Failure, or to find out that he has an inadequate little left arm, and he's just going to have to live with it for the rest of his life. Now, you're sensible people. You read the papers. You review culture. Every so often, a discordant note sounds. Someone introduces the idea of inadequacy or failure as important to usefulness. Someone as significant as Steve Jobs, in his now legendary graduation speech at Stanford University in 2005. 30 to significant progress in his later life. This is what he said. It turned out that getting fired from Apple was the best thing that could have happened to me. The heaviness of being successful was replaced by the lightness of being a beginner again, less sure about everything. But actually that perspective is still more than a Sabbath day's journey away from the biblical framework. Let me give it to you at the most trivial level that I have noticed it. This goes back to when I was still a teenager, to Bushy in Hertfordshire, the first time that I ever saw an American football game. The Army, the United States Army, were hosting a team. I hadn't a clue really what was going on, but I stayed there because I liked the girl who had taken me. Still do, she's my wife. I believe she still likes me as well. I trust so. But I was struck by the uniqueness of the game and these cheerleaders. As a teenager, you would expect me to be struck by the teenagers, but it wasn't how they looked, it was what they said. You can. The fundamental problem was they couldn't. Because they were annihilated by the army. The army thrashed them. And I remember the score becoming so unbelievable. I'm used to football played with your feet, and the score was relatively minor, but they were like at 37-3 as the sun began to wane in the sky, but still they were there. You can do it. You can do it. You can. You can. Somebody should have had the courage to say, stop that. Contemporary church fall in relationship to these things. If there is any sense of accuracy in what we're from the culture hold any water, then would it be fair to say that the church is firmly grounded in its understanding of inadequacy as a foundation for, and that the average seminarian is about to, and how they just can't wait to discover it. Now, I'm going to spend less time on this purposefully. I'm also going to put my sentences in the interrogative rather than in the declarative. I am also not going to give specific examples with people's names, and therefore I run the risk of falling down in a morass of generalizations. Having a way of disclaimer, let me play rebuilding of the walls and the rehang. No, he finally got the version. It puts it in the interrogative. Do you see the trouble we are in? Well, the fact of the matter was they saw it, but they didn't see it. They had grown accustomed with it. It was so in the fact that the walls were broken down, but the broken down walls